Today's video is going to be a bit of a roller coaster. So today I kind of want to dive in and tell a little story about one of the most unique jumping spiders we've had the honour to raise, and that we get a lot of questions about, and that's Nemo. If you've been following us for some time, you'll know exactly who Nemo is, but if you haven't, then you'll have no idea what this video is going to be about, and it could be educational for you if you've never come across this before. His journey has honestly been one of the strangest but most rewarding as a jumping spider keeper, because I haven't experienced it since this, and I hadn't experienced it before this, so he's definitely unique. He's taught us a lot about patience, and I've covered that in many videos, that jumping spiders do teach you patience. But he's also taught me that I may not understand some of the choices that jumping spiders make, but they are done with intent and with intelligence. So let's dive into the video, and I want to tell you all about our beautiful Nemo. So Nemo started out like all of his other siblings. He had a mischievous way about him. He was the first to leave Daisy's second clutch. I remember she had 3 and he was in the second clutch, and he was the first, and this is why I put a little star on his sling pot so I could record his journey growing up, not even knowing that this would be the journey that I happen to share. But he was like all of his brothers and sisters. He had all of his limbs, he was able to jump, he was able to hunt tiny little dwarf fruit flies. He was just a normal spider. I say normal, what is normal? But he was a normal spider. And honestly, I was completely unaware of just how confusing these next few months would be, because he did just start out like any normal spider, which is why this video is kind of important, because this could happen to you as well, and it's nice to know that 1, you're not the only one, but 2, things you can do about it. But then he reached instar 4, so he'd molted 3 times, and we noticed something a little bit different with him, and I'm gonna see if I can find a picture of him with this new change. And I know I'm kind of just teasing a little bit, but we were so surprised because we'd never seen this before as jumping spider keepers or breeders. We'd just never ever seen this before, and that's that Nemo had 8 legs, but then all of a sudden on his left back side there was a little limb, like a little miniature leg just kind of poking out. And yeah, I'd never seen this before, so I quickly hopped online and spoke to some of my friends across the pond, and they had never seen this either. So we were all a little bit confused. To be honest, I didn't know how he'd made it out of his molt successfully, considering where this extra non-functioning limb was. And again, I'll try and find a picture so I can show you exactly where it was, because it wasn't coming out sideways, it was coming underneath and then out, so almost at the bottom of his abdomen rather than to the side like this. So it was really interesting to see that, but also to see that he hadn't mismolted with this extra limb, which was really interesting, because you would expect him to get stuck with that extra limb, but he didn't. And yes, it was definitely interesting. So as I said before, this was a non-functioning limb. It was about half the size of all of his other limbs, so he couldn't ever tread on it, he could never walk on that limb because it just wasn't long enough to touch any surface. It was just like a little protruding, non-functioning limb. And this is when I asked my followers, what should I call this spider, because he is so unique. We've never seen this before. And that's where Nemo comes in. Nemo was the highest voted name, and I thought it was perfect for him. I looked at him and I said immediately, this is Nemo, and we need to tell his story at some point. And here we are. So what's interesting, and I read up on this, is that if spiders ever grow abnormalities, they either tend to pull them off, or it will come off naturally in a future molt. And now that he was I4, he's got a long journey ahead of him. I was very, very concerned about any molt that he had, because I was worried that he'd either get stuck in his molt because of this extra limb, or he would just live with it forever and it might hinder him, because the bigger he gets, the bigger his legs get. Would he be able to jump properly? Would he be able to hunt properly? These were all things that were going through my mind that I just had no idea of where this would go. I had no idea. But honestly, I think I expected him to shed it. I expected he'd hit I5 or I6 and that limb would be gone and I wouldn't have to worry about it. But that's not what happened. His extra leg stayed with him through every single molt. And when I say molting is stressful, regardless, right? This really stressed me out, because on the one hand I was thankful that he'd made it through that molt successfully and he was fine and he was still able to jump and hunt, albeit he was a little bit wobbly because he had this extra limb pushing against all of his other legs. He was still thriving. It was honestly just the most beautiful thing to see, but I was just so on edge with every single molt, because you kind of feel helpless, because you can kind of control the humidity and the temperature in their enclosures, but other than that you have to leave them to their own devices. So every molt was terrifying, and I would update my family and my friends about Nemo, because everybody would ask about him. They'd say, how is he? Has he molted yet? Does he still have that extra limb? And it was definitely a very stressful time as a keeper, but it was all worth it. It was so worth it. I just wait, because it gets interesting. At this point, I guess we kind of just accepted that Nemo was different, and I related to him in a way, because, not to get personal, but I am disabled and less able than most, and I saw a little bit of myself in Nemo. And yes, people are going to say that's weird. Fine, that's your opinion, but I really did gain a really kind of strong connection with Nemo for this reason, and I think that's why this journey meant so much to me. He's thriving despite being different, and I just love that. I love that. So once he reached sub-adulthood, I was very grateful, but I was concerned because he still had one more molt left and I wasn't sure whether he would make it. I'm just going to be really honest. I didn't know for sure if he was going to make it to his mature molt, because with each molt, that limb grew the tiniest little bit longer. Not enough for him to be able to use it or for it to touch the ground, nothing like that, but it was growing with every molt. And I just thought, what if it gets too long and his body is not able to release itself from the exoskeleton with that extra molt, with that extra limb, because that could happen. I mean, typical jumping spiders sometimes miss molt. So this is one that I was definitely concerned about. So when I saw that he'd gone into pre-molt, I checked the temperature and humidity probably every 2 to 3 hours just to make sure that it was all optimal for him, and he molted. However, Nemo turned around and just said, plot twist, because I was not expecting this. So instead of dropping the non-functioning limb, which he hasn't done up until this point, he actually pulled off a functioning limb. He pulled off a leg on the side where there was an extra limb. And I thought, well, isn't that strange? But then I saw him walk for the first time since his mature molt and since he'd hardened. And I actually had a little tear because he was walking normally. He was jumping normally. And that's something I hadn't seen, because he was always really wobbly with this extra limb. And I can never understand why he made that choice, but he was thriving even more now. He was able to walk without falling over. He was jumping and landing properly. He was making better silk lines, which I don't know the science behind that, but he was just moving and functioning better, even though he got rid of a functioning limb in order to keep his small non-functioning limb. It was just kind of an emotional roller coaster. All I'm trying to say is that it clearly made sense from his perspective, and it shows us just how intelligent jumping spiders are to have made such a conscious decision that I will never understand, but he obviously does. There was intent behind pulling off a functioning limb because, as you'll see, he is able to function normally, even though he's pulled a perfectly good leg off. He is a very, very special boy. However, that doesn't mean that it ended well, his mature molt, because we noticed that after a week he'd been exploring, he'd hunted perfectly, he was eating, he was just walking fine, no wobbles. Followers wanted an update on him, and he was out and about. So I picked him up and noticed something didn't look quite right, and at first I didn't know what it was, but then I noticed it and my heart sank, because again, this is a choice that I will never ever know the reason behind. But poor Nemo had only one pedipalp. Now, the pedipalps are used mainly to reproduce, but they can also sense tiny vibrations around a jumping spider because they're covered in setae, or the spider is covered in setae, so they to some extent will feel those vibrations in their environments. But they're mainly used for reproduction. And I just saw him just tapping one little pedipalp away, and I just thought, oh wow, so not only has this poor spider gone through it since I4, but he's now made the choice to pull off a pedipalp. Now, what I believed happened was, as his exoskeleton was hardening, it may have got caught on some web, it may have got caught on a bit of cork bark, and it was still a little bit soft, so it either came off or it came loose and he had to pull it off. And that sounds devastating, it truly, truly does, but what it shows is that he made the right decision for him, because instead of just leaving it, he made a very brave decision and pulled it off. And again, I think it speaks volumes for how intelligent jumping spiders are. Were we upset with this? 100%. He had to pull off a functioning leg just so that he wouldn't wobble anymore. That's at least the conclusion we've come to. And now a pedipalp's come off. So it's not the greatest ending to a mature molt, but does it affect him and impact him daily? No, not at all. We were never going to breed with him because of that abnormality anyway. And he is very, very healthy in spite of the missing leg and the pedipalp. He's just beautiful. I could be biased, but he shows me resilience. He's really taught me a lot, and it's really hard not to get emotional, but he's just a beautiful boy, and he's just taught us so much in this crazy journey of his. I think from a human perspective, we all think we know what is best for our pets and our animals, and Nemo just goes to show that we really don't know, and sometimes we can't truly know, and I see that as a blessing, to be honest, because it changes the way I see jumping spiders, and I didn't think it could change any more than it already has, but it really has. Sometimes their decisions look really strange to us, I guess, but looking back and taking a more holistic approach, I guess, you can understand why now. Yeah, jumping spiders are just incredible. I guess he's taught us that there are still some things that we just don't know, and that could be about any animal. You think you know an animal, there's still more to learn. There is always more to learn about animals, and I think he is a great, great lesson to show us that. I guess they're just tiny creatures that hold big surprises, I guess. So I guess that's Nemo's story. A crazy one, and honestly, I'd love to hear if any of you have been through an experience like it, because I've spoken to many keepers in the hobby, and they always want to know how he's doing because they have never ever heard of anything like that before. So if you have a similar experience, please drop it down below, because I would love to chew your ear off about it. So if you like content like this, please do consider subscribing and clicking on the bell notification, because as I've been told recently, YouTube has been unsubscribing people and turning off their notifications, so please do consider doing that, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.